Ah, shit. We've got another one. We've got another one today for the Exoticals United YouTube channel. Welcome to my church service. This is episode 7 of my Decentering Men series. Actually, is this episode 7? Hold on, let me click on my channel and check. This is episode number 8, actually. I have got so much smoke for men on this channel just because I just feel like all of the talking points that guys like to use, especially towards us MLS women, they are null and void. One of the biggest talking points that I can't stand, that I hear a lot of black women talking about actually, is about how men are protectors and providers. Men are not natural protectors and providers. In fact, the main culprits of violence in our society are men. Men are usually the perpetrators of violence. Men are usually the ones who are committing the violent crimes. Men are usually the ones who are sexually assaulting women. So this whole narrative that they are natural protectors and providers, I feel like this is another patriarchal myth. And we already know that to be true even when it comes to finances because number one, the average guy doesn't even make enough money to provide financially for anyone other than himself. And number two, even if a guy does have a lot of money, just because a guy makes $100,000, for example, that does not mean that by marrying that guy that you will now have access to $100,000. Do you think people get married and they don't talk about money? No. Most people who are married, that's one of the main things they talk about. A man, on average, who actually has some sense, he's not going to just marry a woman and just be like, okay, you can just spend up all of my life savings and spend up all the money in my 401k and go on as many shopping sprees as you want, and I'll just be here and just, soaking it all in. No, that's an unrealistic fantasy that I feel like a lot of femininity YouTubers try to promote. And here on this channel, I am not against femininity content. I'm not against feminine YouTube channels. I'm just trying to help bring some nuance to the conversation because I don't want MLS women to walk into these crazy relationships with manipulative guys who are trying to control them. But usually what happens in a marriage is that the person who makes the most money makes the final decisions about money. So if you want that $2,000 bag, you're going to have to ask your $100,000 husband for permission to purchase that bag. You're going to have to ask for permission to spend that type of money. You're going to have a whole phone conversation with him or have a whole sit down conversation with him or kind of butter him up just to get access to some of his money. We already know that statistically speaking, the average man only spends around $150 per month on dating. And we all know that by the time you get all the way to a marriage, so let's say you've been dating for a few years and you're in a long-term relationship, maybe you're living together, the dating process gradually slows down. So his investment level, on average, statistically speaking, is going to go down. So even that $150 a month, you're not even getting that anymore because you already live with him now, right? So he doesn't have to take you out to a 5-star restaurant every week anymore like he used to when he first met you. No, he already got you now. You're already living with him. You're already cooking for him. You're cleaning for him. You are doing the emotional labor of the relationship. And like I said, I'm just speaking based on statistics here. I know not all, if you're a part of the not all police, you can go ahead and unsubscribe from the channel because nothing that anybody says on YouTube is talking about all people of a particular group. Every channel on YouTube is, for the most part, an opinion-based channel. So there's no need to say, not all men do this, not all black women, not all white women. You're just wasting your breath by doing that. So anybody that espouses those talking points on this channel instantly gets banned. But this whole narrative about men being protectors, I feel, is generally false because if men were natural protectors, then they wouldn't be putting women through so much physical danger by robbing them, drugging them, abusing them, committing violent crimes against them, or committing violent crimes against other men. If men were natural protectors of human beings in general, then men would not be committing violent crimes against other men. And don't even get me started on men of color and their statistics on crimes, violent crimes that they commit amongst themselves with other men. So this whole narrative that men are natural protectors, whether it's protecting you from danger uh, or protecting you financially, I would say that is largely false, especially the protecting you from danger part, because like I said, most people who cause danger are men. The creep who follows you on the street. Usually if somebody says, think of yourself in a dangerous situation, you're usually thinking about a man, right? Because men are the main ones who commit these violent crimes. They're the main ones who put people in dangerous situations. There's even a saying that people use, the bad guy. You know, like whenever you're watching TV and it shows the bad guy, there's not a common phrase or like a common theme of there being a bad woman who like breaks into your house and like assaults you. No, it's the bad guy. And where is that stereotype coming from? Well, it's coming from the fact that most people who commit those types of crimes, violent crimes in general, or they put you in these scenarios of danger, are going to be men. Who are the people who are fighting wars on average? Obviously, being in a war is extremely dangerous, right? You know, you're shooting each other, bombing each other. Obviously, it's men. So men are usually the ones who are creating the danger. And like I said, you don't even have to give me the whole not all argument because that goes without saying. What I'm trying to do is bring nuance to this conversation because I'm tired of people saying that like every man or like, you know, you should be seeking after a protector and provider. Okay, but that's not the norm though. That's not really in a guy's nature, I guess. Well, I don't want to say it's not in his nature. But I would say on average, if you just look at basic statistics and basic sociology and the way that men have operated throughout societies, this is across countries, across racial lines, across socioeconomic status. Generally speaking, they do not act as protectors and providers. Normally, the men are the ones who are causing the danger because they are often seeking after power. And so oftentimes, in order to feel that power and in order to exert power over others, the man has to commit certain acts of violence. And this actually makes me think of men like Diddy or men in the industry who want to feel powerful sexually or they want to feel dominant sexually. Usually the way that they will do that is by drugging women and then, you know, R-wording them or assaulting them. This is very common, and this all has to do with a lot of men's deep desire for things like having power. So when I use the term power, I do think this can apply to political power, but right now I'm kind of talking more so about like social power or even sexual power. If you look at pornography, which is what a lot of men are addicted to and which is where a lot of men get their sexual standards from, usually pornography tends to show a man in the dominant position. Or it is promoting the man like, you know, choking a woman or slamming a woman or kind of like doing these violent sexual types of acts with a woman, or it'll show like multiple women with one guy or whatever. You know what I mean? That's kind of the general thing that tends to be promoted on porn, which is what guys are getting their sexual standards from, obviously. And by the way, when it comes to that, if you've ever been in a relationship with a guy and you have ever talked to your boyfriend or whoever about sex, have you ever asked a guy, where did you get that from? Like, for example, let's say you guys ask each other what you each like sexually. Have you ever asked him, where did you start liking that? How did you begin liking that? Most of you ladies watching this channel have probably never even asked a man that. Usually his standards are coming from things like pornography or potentially women that he's had in the past or whatever. So it's not coming from you if you haven't had sex with him. So just remember that. But anyway, back to the whole protecting and providing thing. Most guys are not protecting human beings. They're not the protectors of the human race on average. Usually, from what I've examined and based on what I've studied, if you look at sociology, which is the study of society, then you see men generally kind of causing more of these wars, causing pain for others, causing suffering for others. And like I said, this is due to wanting a sense of dominance and power. I would actually argue that women tend to be more protective than men are, because if you look at the way that women are towards men, a lot of women will literally cape for men. They will protect men. Women will protect predators. Women will protect crooked pastors. Women will protect their cheating husbands. Women will protect their wayward sons. Women protect their children on average. And when I use women protecting, when I use that phrase, What I'm talking about is emotional protection. Women tend to try to shield people's reputations. I think of the whole Meg the Stallion situation where the guy shot her and she like didn't tell the police. Now, I'm not saying that I even know a bunch of details about that situation, honestly, but that's kind of one of the first things that came to mind. And I also think of all of those pastors that you see in those churches where like they'll be sleeping with the congregation, they'll be stealing money and stuff, and then their wife will be sticking by him, sticking by his side. It makes me think of women like Derek Jackson's wife. It makes me think of pastors like John Gray and his wife and how she's just sticking with him and how oftentimes they will even blame the other woman. So I've noticed that women can actually become very protective over the people that they love. Meanwhile, I've seen men who will claim to love their children, but then they will straight up abandon them. And then for the men who say, oh no, like those laws aren't fair about child support and stuff like that. Well, those laws were created by men. You do know that, right? Men are the ones who write the laws. Men are the ones who created and who largely run the entire court system in general. So if other men didn't keep you in check, you as a man would literally just be out here creating children and abandoning them. And we actually still see men doing that to this day. They don't even care about the laws. They will just create the children and then just, escape and run away and never take care of those children that they claim to love. So that's what makes me sometimes question what a man's definition of love is, because I'll hear guys say, oh, I love my children, and then they haven't seen their children in 25 years. They haven't taken care of their children. They'll be like, oh, I love my mom and dad. I love my parents. But then it's like, once again, their parents are literally like living in slums, or they haven't visited their parents. They're not doing anything to help their parents. Meanwhile, I've seen women go to great lengths and great measures to protect their family structures. For example, I've seen women go through entire therapy sessions just to try to keep a family together. They'll read all these books on how to have a good relationship. Women will literally try to get in shape. They'll try to learn how to do their makeup better. They'll try to learn how to become more sexually desirable and jump through all of these hoops for their husbands just so they can protect, number one, their image, and number two, so they can try to protect their children from being in a broken home. I generally don't tend to see men putting that same level of energy into maintaining a proper family structure. In fact, if I were to really be honest about this, I tend to see more men behaving in a way that is kind of exploitative in nature, kind of exploiting their family or exploiting the love of that girl that they have on their arm, or kind of exploiting the fact that they have children. I've heard a lot of men say that they want to have children just so they can carry on their family name, so it still points back to himself, or they want to have children so that he can have someone to take care of him when he's older, so once again it's pointing back to himself, or he wants to have a son so that he can teach him how to be just like him. Okay, so once again it's just circling kind of back to yourself. Now, as far as women, they could have the same reasons for having children. I personally am child free, so I'm actually not quite sure. But I just feel like a lot of men, when it comes to marriages and relationships in general, what I've noticed is that women tend to leave relationships if they are being abused, cheated on, or neglected. Men tend to leave relationships because they've got another woman on deck. I've noticed that generally speaking, men don't tend to leave relationships. They will just cheat, or they will, kind of emotionally check out or start mistreating the woman, but they won't leave the relationship because the benefits for a man in a relationship are so great, to the point where you've got men who are literally going in entire marriages with women they don't even love, women they're not even attracted to. And a lot of men will stay with these women simply because of the labor that woman provides for him. And so that's not protective in nature. That sort of behavior is not protective. And that sort of behavior is not provisional, because the woman is providing the main labor. And then guys will be like, oh, well, we're the breadwinners. We're the ones making money. But you making money and paying bills is something you would have been doing if you were single anyway. So it's not like you're even putting in extra effort, or like, your income just tripled or quadrupled suddenly and you just decided, oh, okay, I'm married now, let me become a millionaire tomorrow. No, you're doing the same thing you would have been doing if you were single. And also, I've noticed that when men say that they are going to protect you from who? From other men. So once again, it's like, okay, you may be saying that men are the protectors, but men, generally speaking, are the the most predatory if you look at the nature of both sexes, or if you kind of look at the sociology of men and women. And again, this is across global lines, this is across cultures, across races. So I definitely do not believe that men are natural protectors and providers. And also, let's talk about education, because women in general are outpacing men in terms of education. So men being, automatic providers. Well, if men were supposedly just naturally better at trying to provide, wouldn't men be working harder to get more education and get more certifications and try to do whatever they can to move up in society? No. The only reason that we're stereotyping men as being the providers is because we live in a patriarchal system where there was a pay gap where men were being paid more than women. And so because of an unfair system, we began stereotyping and saying, oh, well, men are just the natural providers. Well, no, you're just living in a biased system that was paying men more money for simply being men. But now that the tables are kind of turning a little bit more and people are starting to realize their internalized biases, we are seeing a rise in kind of these average at best men financially. And so the average man who calls himself a provider, what I would want to ask him is, provide what? For who? And who are you a provider in comparison to? Who are you a better provider than, and who is a better provider than you? Because I believe that women, let's say you want to get married or something, or you want to have a family with a man. I don't believe that provision should only be about finances, first of all. So, but not only do men, generally speaking, tend to fail in that area, but for the women who were raised religious, let's say you were raised in a Christian background, Muslim background, Catholic background, those religions teach that the man is supposed to be the one providing a sense of direction and a sense of purpose and a sense of vision for the family and where the family is headed. And, what is our family going to look like in 10 years? What are we going to look like in 5 years? The average man doesn't even know how to plan to wash his underwear. He doesn't even know how to plan an outfit that matches his shoes. He doesn't even know how to plan to organize his cabinets. So how is he going to plan the lives of his wife and children? And also, let's talk about that narrative. Do you really want a man? Do you really want somebody else planning your life? Or let's say, for the women who have fathers, do you really want your father trying to plan out your life? I know that was a disaster for me when I was growing up. By the way, my parents are still married and still in my life or whatever. So for those of you who will try to attack me and say, she has daddy issues. No, my parents are still married. My father's in my life. But my father, he tried to plan my life or whatever, or kind of try to influence me in a certain direction when I was younger. So it's okay, well, would you really want that for your children? For your child to have her father or to have her parents just kind of directing and saying, no, this is what you're going to be when you grow up. You're going to be a doctor. You're going to be an engineer. You're going to be this, and that's your only option. I mean, that would work out fantastic if your child is actually interested in that. But let's say your kid turns out to be interested in something else, or maybe their gifts lie in another area. Then that's going to pose a problem. So this whole narrative that men are supposed to be deciding the direction of your entire family lineage, why are we giving them that sort of power? They've clearly already failed with directing their own lives. Most men don't even know how to control their own dicks. So if they can't even control where their eyes look, if they can't even control, their dick, or who they empty their sperm to, and they can't even control their own thoughts or their own feelings or emotions, and they burst out in anger all the time. I see men often have these rage fits and stuff. That is behavior that on average that I don't tend to see with women as much, generally speaking, because women tend to be shamed for having that sort of behavior. Women, we get called masculine if we have these fits of rage and stuff. So I would say, generally speaking, women tend to be more, probably more closed off, or more subtle with our emotional outbursts. But I've seen men straight up throw things. I've seen men in the office, actually, at corporate jobs, start throwing things, cursing and shouting and yelling, kicking chairs, kicking tables. But generally speaking, women are frowned upon for doing that. But for men, oh, it's just another day. And I also think about sports as well. We see lots of men throwing these rage fits based on sports games. So it is normalized for men to be enraged and to show these negative emotions and almost these violent types of emotions. So if you've got this man in your life, or raising your kids, who he's got these violent types of emotions, he's not good at planning his own life, and then he's directing your children's life. And let's say he's a stepfather. Let's say you're a woman with children and you marry a man, and now he's their stepdad coming into their lives when they, let's say they didn't have a father figure before. Is that providing emotional support for your children? Like, what exactly is he providing on average? So this is why I don't believe that the average man is a protector or a provider. I believe that a man who is a quote unquote protector or provider would be something that is extremely rare enough to the point where women should decenter men. Because if you make your whole life, like if you revolve your whole life around planning to have this man give you a sense of direction as a woman, or, he's going to provide vision for my life. He's going to provide vision for my family's life. If you're a religious type, he's going to provide direction in the lives of myself and our children. And he's going to be the head of the household, and I'm going to submit to him. All of this. Are you sure that's what you want to revolve your life around? Because that talking point implies that women do not inherently have our own strong sense of desire and strong sense of dreams and purpose and goals for our own lives. And I believe that a lot of men actually tend to mooch off of and ride the coattails of women, generally speaking. Behind every successful man, you tend to see a successful woman who kind of helped push him to get there. This is why, on average, most of the presidential candidates are married. Most of the mayors and the governors and high-level officials, on average, tend to be married. A lot of wealthy, rich men, on average, tend to be married. You know why? Because they had a woman helping them, usually, to get to where they are. And this is why men wrote the laws about divorce and about how a lot of women have to get 50% in the divorce, because men wrote these laws. So for all the guys saying, oh, the laws aren't fair, well, you need to take that up with your own gender, because men are the ones who create a lot of these laws about divorce, because those men understood that, wait a minute, that man wouldn't be where he is. Jeff Bezos actually wouldn't be who he is had his wife not quit her career, which she did at the time. She quit her career to help him work on his, Amazon thing or whatever before it became big, because Amazon started off where they were just selling books. And I don't know all the details, but I'm just using it as an example. So behind every successful man on average, is a successful, smart woman who helped push him to get there. And then conversely, behind every failed woman, or behind every woman who is a failure, is usually a trauma that is tied to a man. Usually a woman who is a quote unquote failure in life, a baby mama, a woman who's on crack or whatever, generally speaking, her failures are tied to traumas from men, whether it is the little girl who got assaulted and raped all the time, whether it is the woman who was lied to and the guy told her we're going to get married or whatever, and she was young and naive and a teenager, and she believed his lies and actually believed that he loved her, and she believed that he would stick with her even through the pregnancy or whatever. Usually there's some sort of trauma attached to men that happens with a lot of women who become failures. So this whole narrative that men are protectors and providers, protecting what? Protecting you from other men? Protecting your emotions? Because they're certainly not doing that. Men on average don't even if you look at Dr. Daniel Amen, men on average do not even think about their emotions or about your emotions at the same capacity as you do as a woman. Dr. Daniel Amen proves this. Please go check out Dr. Daniel Amen. He is a double board certified psychiatrist, and he studies the brains of tens of thousands of people. And he also studies the differences in the neural pathways of the brain. Like, he studies women's brains versus men's. So definitely check him out. Men on average are not providing emotional support. So let's say you as a woman lose your job. Your man, generally speaking, he will just kind of be like, oh, okay, well, you're going to figure it out. Meanwhile, most women, like let's say you're a woman and you lose your job or go through a breakup or whatever, a woman will call another woman and then they'll have like a 3-hour long conversation and talk about how, the whole workplace is trash. They will talk shit about their entire life stories and all of their bad stories that they've had at work and stuff. And they will provide so much more well-rounded emotional support versus men. Even if you look at statistics on therapists, 75% of therapists are women. Only 25% of therapists who provide you emotional support are men. So if that doesn't give you better insight into the emotional importance or the importance that women place on emotions versus the importance that men place on emotions, I mean, that right there is proof. So it's like, what is he really providing on average? And what is he really protecting you from on average? I'm just asking you guys this so you can begin to think about the man in your life and what you want from him. Like, what do you want from a man? Do you want, okay, let's say you want provision. What kind of provision? Financial provision? Okay, then you better get a man who has money, a lot of money, and a man who spends more than the average on you per month if that's what you're looking for. Because I just don't understand this narrative that men are naturally protectors and providers. Like, according to who? Based on what? Compared to who? And again, when it comes to emotional support or caring about increasing their mental health, generally speaking, women are the ones who care about increasing their mental health more than men because the majority of the patients in therapy are women. Usually women are the ones who are actually taking the accountability and saying, hey, I am messed up. Something is wrong with the way that I'm thinking. Something is wrong with the way I'm feeling. Let me sign up and pay for therapy. Most men are not spending their money on therapy. You already know what most men are spending their money on. Most men are spending their money on going out to eat, porn, and maybe some sneakers or, a new haircut or something. Cars, like a car payment so that he can attract women with his nice car. So the financial priorities are also different. That's another thing that a lot of women don't think about. They'll say, oh, I want a man who is a provider. Okay, let's say you end up marrying a man and he's a millionaire. So do you think you're going to be able to come into his life and tell him how to spend his millions? No, absolutely not. You're going to come into his life and you get to listen to him while he decides how to spend his millions. And you are lucky if you get access to thousands of those millions. And by the way, this is not supposed to be negative. Like I said, this is supposed to just help you guys to think about what it is you truly want and what sort of biases and internalized misogyny you may have against yourself. Because I feel like a lot of women grossly underestimate their own ability to make money or to achieve their dreams. You can achieve your dreams. I would hope that you believe in yourself enough to know that you can still achieve your dreams whether you're single or not. Being single is not a handicap. Not having a man is not a handicap. And I think that a lot of these YouTubers who talk about, oh no, you have to find a protector and provider, you have to find this, you have to find that. They talk so much about this high value man and kind of like where to snag one, but then they never give you an exact example of who this ethereal, proverbial high value man even is. Like, who is this high value man? Point fingers and name names. Give me an example. Because they'll use examples of women who they think are doing a good job at dating, like Lori Harvey, but Lori Harvey dated Future and Diddy. I don't consider those guys to be high value men whatsoever. Those guys just happen to be rappers who hopefully have money. Well, in Diddy's case, he has money. I don't really know anything about Future, but it's like, just because a guy has a big paycheck or whatever, that's not what I define high value based on. That just means high income. A lot of the language that we use around relationships and around men needs to be changed. High value, Future, in my opinion, is not high value. He is just high income or high earning. So Diddy, same thing. He's not a high value man. He's just a high earning man. Those are two different things. And I would hope that you as a woman believe that you are enough of a smart woman and enough of a business-minded woman to be able to make just as many millions on your own. Do you not believe in yourself? I guess that's my question for the women who are so desperately trying to chase after these quote unquote high earning or high value men. It's like, okay, do you not believe that you could earn $100,000 a year? Because in my opinion, 100K is actually not that much. 100K is like middle class. Respectfully, I believe 100K is just, middle class. So if a guy earns 100K, I'm not like, oh my God, like I'm fangirling. Oh, I'm just going to worship the ground he walks on because he makes 100K. 100K may be more impressive to a woman who makes a lot less, or maybe she comes from an underprivileged background, or, maybe she's below the poverty line, and that's fine. I'm not throwing shade at that at all. If that is considered like a lot of money to you, then by all means, that's great. And also, let's say that you truly do believe that men are natural protectors and providers. Okay, fine. But I've noticed that most men who are providing for their wives or whatever, or let's say they're making all the money and the wife and the children are just kind of like living off of him, for lack of better words, a lot of those guys are actually quite resentful. We've seen guys talk about how, women only use me for money and, they're just here to siphon off my money. They just want to take my money. So it's like, even if a guy is providing for you or whatever, do you really want to spend the rest of your life around a guy who's just complaining about everything and complaining about how much everything costs or whatever? So yeah, I don't believe that men are natural protectors and providers. I believe that men are good at doing things, like they're good at building houses, building cars, building infrastructure. They're good at working. I believe that men are good at labor. But do I believe that they are naturally, inherently, they have this high moral code of I'm going to protect and provide for my community? Absolutely not. Because men are 14 times more likely to go to jail than women. So obviously they're not protecting us. They're creating problems in our society on average because prisons are filled with men. There are more men in prisons than women. So obviously they're not natural protectors and providers. What are they providing? Violence, crime? And by the way, like I said, I'm not saying all guys are doing this, but I just never believed, I don't believe anymore that talking point. I guess I never had thought about it before, the protector and provider talking point, until recently. And I was like, wait, yeah, actually, I don't think that I believe that. And I think that if men did want to provide, let's say they wanted to provide emotional safety and financial stability and all of that stuff, I don't think the average man actually wants to provide that under modern circumstances. I feel like the only men who do want to provide that to a woman who is submissive, aka a woman who kind of follows behind him, believes what he says, lets him have the final say, lets him make all the final decisions. A very traditional type of man, I guess, or a man who, like I said, he wants the woman to be kind of almost like the second class citizen in the household. So, for example, the man gets to make the final decision on what city you live in because he's the one making the money. So you have to live in whatever city his job is in. The man gets to make the final decision on where you go on vacation because he's the one paying for it. This whole narrative that like you're just going to come into a grown man's life, especially a man who is smart. I would assume that if you want to be with a guy, you would be with a guy who's smart. I would assume that any man who has some sort of common sense and some sort of self-esteem, who has worked hard for the millions that he has, you think you're just going to come into his life and just be like, oh, nope, now we're going to spend $10 million on me. So you think that you're just going to date Jeff Bezos and then just be like, okay, Jeff, so give me $10 million. All right, thanks. You're not, that's not realistic. Respectfully, it's not realistic. The test results came back and you're not doing it. I've noticed that most men, on average, they don't want to be financial providers. They just want to be contributors. They just want to be contributors. They want to contribute 50% of the bills and you contribute 50% of the bills while they go jack off to porn and, save money, and they can spend more of their money on video games or tennis shoes or whatever, Jordans, and you're going to be cooking their meals. And so then guess what? With all the healthy meals you're cooking for him, now he gets to use his newfound health to get his body in shape so he can attract his side chicks. And I know that not all guys are like this, but just generally speaking, I don't think that men are the protectors and providers. I believe that men on average want to do 50-50 protection and provision. So they protect 50% and you protect 50%. They provide 50% and you provide 50% as the woman, while he simultaneously uses other women to meet his sexual needs and uses you to meet his domestic and emotional needs. So by the way, that is not him providing you with emotional stability. I feel like the one thing that guys are the worst at providing is emotional stability to a woman. They are horrible on average at providing a woman with a sense of peace. You know that whole argument that a lot of guys try to use, like, oh, well, you need to be his peace. Most men are actually the cause of chaos in a woman's life. A woman will have a totally peaceful life living in her beautiful apartment. It's all decorated and peaceful. She's over here meal prepping. All of her stuff is all organized in the kitchen. And some man will come in and move in with her and maybe he'll pay 50% of the bills. Maybe he'll pay 100% of the bills. But that man will tear up her house. He will tear up her furniture. He will blow up her bathroom. He will go into the kitchen and eat a bunch of food and create dirty dishes. He will get her pregnant. She will birth his kids. Let's say they get married and she becomes a stay-at-home mom, kind of locked up in the house, doesn't get to go out and pursue her own dreams because her dreams are now dead because she now has to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, caring for the children. And when the man gets home, he's not even expected on average to care for the children. Usually it's just, that's the woman's job or whatever. So, but in exchange, he gets to pay for the bills. But no, on average, that tends to cause a woman chaos. It tends to ruin a woman's sense of peace. And this is why studies show that on average, women who are married, they literally live shorter lives, whereas men who are married live longer lives. You know why? Because the average woman acts as a nurse for a man. She acts as his purse because she's giving him a discount on bills. She is giving him free orgasms and, endorphins and stuff by kind of coddling him, snuggling him, massaging his back when he gets off of work, complimenting him, making him feel like the big man of the house. So he's gaining all of these benefits. And on average, the average man is not doing all of that to a woman. You know why? Because this goes back to the whole thinking about emotions thing. A lot of men don't even think about emotions to the point where they're thinking, how can I make her feel beautiful today? How can I make her feel special today? How can I make her feel like she's spoiled today? The average man is not thinking that. He's thinking, how can I get her to bounce on my D today? How can I get sex today? How can I get a discount on bills? Okay, I want to move into a bigger house. I don't like all this pink furniture and these fuzzy blankets and stuff. No, I want to have like some more sports posters and I need a man cave. Have you ever noticed how a lot of men, they will like demand to have a man cave, but if you're a woman and you want like a woman cave, that's not really a thing. Usually it's like normalized for a man to have an extra bedroom in the house just for himself. But it's not very normalized for a woman to have that for herself. So I do feel like a lot of relationships do tend to be kind of more male-centered, just on a subconscious level. I'm not even saying that men are doing this maliciously, because I actually don't think that men in general are malicious about this. I just think that this is an overarching problem in our society that I just want to highlight. And I'm trying to bring nuance to the dating conversation. I'm not trying to say, oh, you can't date, oh, you should not deal with men. But I do want you here in the Pretty Girl Club to think about what it is you need out of a man. What do you need him for? And there is no right or wrong answer. And you can just think about that and leave it in the comment section. Or you can just think about that to yourself and you don't have to tell anyone. But it's, what do you need from a man and how can you get that need met without, being traumatized over it? Because the average long-term relationship for a woman, it's not providing her peace. Because, women, they have to deal with all of these micro betrayals throughout the relationship. So catching him looking at porn, catching him texting other women, catching him, looking a little too hard at that girl at the mall or whatever, catching him getting a little too close with his female friends, kind of going through these arguing scenarios with him, having to argue back and forth with him, constantly having to prove yourself as a woman, constantly having to prove your beauty to him. I've noticed that as well, where some guys, they will praise another woman's beauty and then they won't praise their girlfriend's beauty. Or they will treat a woman who is not his girlfriend, he'll treat her better than he treats you. And you are his girlfriend or his wife. So I've seen lots of women try to prove their beauty to a man, try to prove their sex appeal to a man because they don't like the fact that their man is like looking at porn or like doesn't want to have sex with her. So it makes her feel very heartbroken, very unwanted, very like not pretty or whatever. So I've seen women jump through all of these hoops, whereas men, on average, men aren't jumping through shit. On average, they will just check out of the relationship and be mentally preparing themselves for you to dump them, or they will be mentally preparing themselves to get back out of the dating market. I've heard lots of stories of guys going on dating apps while they're still in a relationship because men, they have to, generally speaking, they kind of have to monkey branch from relationship to relationship because a lot of men are actually extremely codependent. I am convinced that men are way more codependent than women. I'm also convinced that men want women way more than women want men. I'm convinced that men need women more than women need men because men actually seem to need women for the non-tangibles. So women, let's say if you're a woman who's poor, you may need a man for money. And so this is where, sex work and stuff like that can come into play. But generally speaking, men tend to need women for the non-tangibles. They want the woman's companionship because, like I said, a lot of men, generally speaking, are very isolated. A lot of men are not very well socialized like how women are. And a lot of men, they didn't grow up with as much affection as little girls do. Because, like I said, when you have a daughter, you tend to snuggle her, cuddle her, you kiss on her face and stuff, and you're like, oh, you're so pretty. Even sisters do this with each other, or female cousins, female friends, you kind of snuggle up together. But a lot of men don't do that because of homophobia. They view that as being gay or whatever. So a lot of men are very touch starved. A lot of men are extremely validation starved, which is why we see lots of cheating and stuff. So especially if a guy gets into a position of power, let's say he gets a lot of money or he becomes a celebrity, he could go from being the dorkiest guy to suddenly he wants to be a Casanova. Now he wants to sleep with all the ladies. You know why? Because he was so starved for validation, to the point where his desperation for that validation, it just increases over time. So this is why I say I believe that men want women way more than women want men, because men want validation on average way more than women do, because women are naturally more validated in our society. That is female privilege. Women are naturally kind of like believed more if something bad happens to her, like let's say she gets hurt or she's like, it's because women are more vulnerable, or we are perceived as being more vulnerable. And so because of this, and because of violence mainly being caused by men, I do feel like women do receive a lot of emotional support. Now, as far as the court system and abuse victims getting justice, I'm not quite sure about all that. But I do believe that when it comes to emotional support and emotional validation, women get a lot of that. And also, men, because they pedestalize sex so much, all you have to do as a woman is have certain qualities about you that are considered sexy, and boom, there's your pretty privilege right there. You could have one good feature that is considered sexy, and you will have pretty privilege based on that one feature, based on your big booty, or based on your boobs, or based on having a flat stomach, or anything that is sexualized. It'll automatically put you on a pedestal above a man. So because of this lopsided society that we live in, a lot of men are extremely validation starved. And that starvation that a man has, that deep longing, that deep isolating loneliness, and the depression that comes from that, that makes women the natural void fillers for a man. That's really what a woman does oftentimes, is a woman has the ability to fill a deep void that is within the man. Now, obviously, this is a temporary filler. Like, it's really bad to try to use people to fill your own emotional voids. But since men are not really going to therapy, based on statistics, and since men are not even really thinking about their emotions because they're not socialized that way, that's the problem that we have in our society today. So, in conclusion, once a cheater, always a cheater. Most guys are incels, and you should probably decenter guys, and you should just think about the nuances of what you're dealing with when you get in a relationship with a guy. You should think about what you want and need from a man and make sure you're getting your needs met. And then you have to be willing to, what are you willing to give in exchange in order to get that need met by a man? I want you ladies to think about that. Anyway, let me know what you think in the comments section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.